from Rowan University. Topics of history in Camden is our course.
I'm Steve Rupinski, and I'm in the same course, the Topics of History of Camden at Rowan. All right, so.
Okay, Father Doyle, in the Poet of Poverty video, you stated that because of your upbringing in Ireland, here I know who I am. How do you feel your childhood has related to your connection in the community of Camden?
Well, I grew up in sort of a poor but privileged, as I'd call it, because I was never denied beauty because the land was beautiful and nurturing and connected to the earth and all of that. So I would, in growing up, we had food and friendship, but didn't have much money. The farm did not produce, it was too small to produce much money. So I did know about poverty, you know. Like on my birthday, I would get one boiled egg. You couldn't imagine that, but that's because the eggs had to be sold to get enough money to buy flour and tea and sugar and things like that. So I knew poverty in that way, but then I was rich in neighborhood and rich in wonderful people that they were all my mother and they were all my father, you know. So I was very privileged that way. And so being here, then I would always be interested in beauty. That one of in the present age, in the last 40 years, it was unfair the amount of ugliness that prevailed, and I would have a great desire to make it more beautiful for the children, because a child needs beauty in order to be nourished, and without beauty a child is deprived. So I would have that kind of sense and for it. And Camden, like originally in terms of history, Camden was originally an island. When the Native American people lived on it, it was an island. And I can't bring up like the exact name of it. You can look it up. What was the name of this island that the Native American people had? And it was, if you know the area, that of course you have the huge, wonderful river on the west. It has been flowing for 200 miles before it gets to Camden, and then has another 100 miles to the sea. So that magnificent river. Then the Cooper River, which is a new name, of course, historically, but it flows in from the east side and flows into the Delaware. Now the Delaware River, I would say what you call elbows around Camden. It flows west and then it flows south. So it's kind of almost embracing Camden, and with the Cooper coming in from the east side, so then it's surrounded by water right away on three sides. Then there was the Newton Creek, which if you go down Broadway towards Gloucester, you pass over that. There's a kind of a hump there, and you pass over the Newton Creek. So the Newton Creek comes very close to the Cooper River over there on 130, where the Collingswood, used to be Collingswood Circle, the Collingswood Diner there. In that spot there was flooded forever, and they spent 4 years trying to deal with that problem, and they solved it. And the reason was that it was originally an island there. Cooper and Newton Creek were connected, and that was the circle was complete. So it's kind of interesting that way that it was, and because it had a river, ocean-going ships could come up the river from the Atlantic Ocean and so you had a great place to live because you were connected with the world. You know, am I going ahead of myself here? So what's very interesting about that is that Camden, well, William Cooper came down here from Burlington City, and he was a Quaker, and Quakers were very much the original, we call maybe the original European people that came to this area. And they had, a lot of them came from Ireland, not that Ireland had a lot of Quaker people, but they were being persecuted in England at one time, and then they came over to Ireland. Like William Penn's father lived in Cork, which is in Ireland. And then many that came over from Ireland settled here. And in your history you would know that the Magna Carta was established in like near London, where the people wrote down their charter of what, in trying to give themselves some rights against the king. And so that's the Magna Carta. It's probably one of the most famous documents in the world, the Magna Carta. And it was a place called Runnymede in south of London. But if you know this area, you'll know there's a Runnymede not very far from here because of those Quakers. Okay. And so they settled here, the Coopers and so forth, in North Camden, but it's North Camden today. Camden, the word Camden comes from a lawyer from England who was friendly to the American, or what you'd call them, the native people, the people here, that he was friendly to them as they tried to get independence. And that's why there's 14 Camdens in America, because he was such a respected person from London and his name got on this. So anyway, I just want to say this one little thing here, that William Cooper came, and then the Cooper family got established here, and then that was like 16 something. But then later on, I think a great grandnephew of his, he's called Jacob Cooper, and he came over here from Philadelphia, part of the same crowd, Coopers, and he established a village here, and it didn't prosper very much. It didn't go very far, and so in like maybe a couple of small villages, but however, in 1828, you probably know that, 1828, it was established as a city. I mean, a town is a better word. It was established as a town with the government in 1828, and there was 1,100 people in Camden. There's more people in Woodrow Wilson High School today than was in Camden when it got started as a city in 1828. Now, here's what's really interesting, that in 6 years later, in 1834, I should say that the railroad enterprise, railroads, that New Jersey was very early on that the railroad began, and I can't quite say that. You can look it up and see where the railroad began, but New Jersey got into railroad traffic or railroad transport early on. And in 1834, they finished a railroad line that came down from Perth Amboy, New Jersey, all the way down to Camden. And it got across, they built a bridge across the Cooper River, and the railroad reached the river. So when those two entities met, the Delaware River and the New Jersey Railroad, that was Conception Camden. Those two entities met. They're both transportation entities. And they met. Now, Philadelphia way back then was a very big city in America, comparatively. And so if you want to make something, make it in Camden, because you could put it on the ferry boat across to Philadelphia and sell it. You could also put it on the railroad and send it north, and when you got to Perth Amboy, there was a ferry system there across to Manhattan. If you want to make mousetraps, this is the place, because you could move it. So,
Okay.
so that's very important in understanding Camden, how it became a very important city, a great industrial center and all of that. So that gives you the base. It has to do with a railroad and a ferry.
Okay. So, in a 2009 interview with the National Catholic Report, you stated that the Catholic Church had reduced the number of parishes from 9 to 6. Have you noticed that the reduction of size of the Catholic Church has inhibited you in your making difference in Camden against poverty and with the heart of Camden?
Have I noticed that the...
It seems like the Catholic Church has shrunk in size in Camden.
Well, it shrunk hugely because the people, when African American people moved up from the South, and that was in the 50s and 60s, and then white people then ran.
Mm-hmm.
They just, when I came to Camden in 1968, your mother wasn't born then, I don't know, but it's a long time ago. And I was in a church in East Camden, St. Joseph's, and there were 25 families a month leaving. 20, you wouldn't be long dying out at that rate. But now the African American people who came north because they were treated so badly and afflicted so much in the South that they went north trying to find a better deal. When poor people move north, they're moving into the cold. You can be sure that they're badly treated in the South, because you could survive in the South because the temperature was much better than you could in Chicago. You die in the winter in Chicago. So it tells you how afflicted the poor African American people were to be going north in search. And so they came to all these northern cities and trying to find a better deal. As they did, the white people just ran is my word, out of Camden. So that would be, and the African American people coming up were Baptist. And so that's why Sacred Heart School here is a Catholic school with a majority of Baptist people, children. Most of our children in our school are Baptist. So you have a Catholic church creating a school for Baptist children, which is a great thing in its own way, but it tells you how the Catholics have left. Now, on the other hand, as they did, then there is a great influx of Hispanic or Latino people into Camden, and they're usually Catholic. So these churches, like up on St. Joseph's, for example, in East Camden, huge Latino congregation. St. Anthony's in Cramer Hill, huge Latino congregation, and the same for the Holy Name Church, which is now kind of merged with the Cathedral Church at Broadway and Market. So, in one sense, the white Catholics moved, but the Latino Catholics came. So, the Latino Catholics would be poorer than the previous white people, you know, because Camden was a a powerful city. It grew from 1828. It had 1,100 people when it started, and the population of Camden doubled. Note that word, doubled, every decade till the end of the century. And by the end of the century, which would be 1900, there were, instead of 1,100 people, there were 75,000. Excuse me, in this town. there was 75,000 people. Industry exploded because what I said about transportation. And the shipyard came then in 1900, and with the development of the shipyard, by the Second World War, there were 37,000 people working at the shipyard. And there was the biggest shipyard in the United States, and that number of people working. However, the tragic side of that is that it was war that was making it successful. See, and it's we were living by the sword, and Jesus made some serious comment on that. If we live by the sword, we will die, and we died. You know, that whole thing collapsed. So, but then there were other great industries. They would say about Camden, they made everything from the biggest ship in the world to a toilet seat, everything in between. Incredible reality. And then you would hear about that in school. The Victor talking machine developed again in around 1900, and then Camden was known all over the whole world, because this huge industry at creating the recording and the record and the gramophone and Nipper, the little dog listening to his master's voice. That logo was the most famous logo in the world. It was from Camden.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just to change pace a little bit, so I've heard of Camden 13, and I'm just wondering, or Camden 28.
Big number anyway.
How did you get involved with that, and how did it kind of start?
Well, I was a teacher in high school, teaching religion back in the 60s, and so my kind of approach to teaching religion was to see how does it play now? What is the meaning of this for now? So when I would be talking about Moses, I would be talking also about Martin Luther King. So that what is it? Who's the leader getting us through the desert now? Do you know, and this sort of thing. So I worked at that, and then I very much focused on that. So then I would be teaching that, you know, in Matthew's Gospel, there's the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, and it goes on talking about that, and it says that in the time of Moses, it was an eye for an eye. Now, Mahatma Gandhi said that an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. Gandhi, you should sure study Gandhi. He was one of the great visionaries of the world. But anyway, Jesus said, speaking of Moses, was an eye for an eye. That's what, if I kill one of your cows, you kill one of mine. Mm-hmm. But that was an improvement, Moses. Before that, I could get 7 of your cows for you doing damage to my cow, legitimately within the law. So then he made an eye for an eye, and then Jesus referred to that and said, you know, an eye for an eye. Moses said, but I say, you know, don't love your enemy. Do good to those who hate you. So I had to teach that. And then I would say to the students that with the Vietnam War, it was just raging. And I would know that the Vietnam Wars, the idea of doing it was deception, that it was not, it was never declared, the Vietnam War. And it was deception that got us into it. The American people were deceived by their government. And so I'd know that kind of stuff. So I would be saying to these students, they're sophomores, and I wouldn't say very much beyond that because they couldn't get up and walk out, you know what I mean? Like you could in a church or something. So I would say that you can't square the teaching of Jesus and bombing the people. You can't put them together. You have to choose. They don't go together, and never will and never did. So I'd be talking like that. Now I was that time in Holy Spirit High School, which is in Absecon, Route 9, and but there were some of the vice principal, particularly, they were like he was like a Marine, you know. He had a crew cut and everything. So like I became not a favorable person there, and they had a rally for victory in Vietnam, a rally for victory for the war in Vietnam, a victory there, down in Bader Field in Atlantic City in 1968. And the war was raging. And they had this rally. 3 young men came back from Vietnam. The politicians got into it and made a big rah-rah rally for Vietnam because these 3 fellows came back. Now, the school band of Holy Spirit committed, the authorities in the school committed the band to play at the rally. And I said around the school, they can't do that. You can't go out there with your Holy Spirit word on your drum and start hammering it to win a war. You can't do that, it's wrong. Now that didn't go down real well. And a long answer to your question, but it is a long story, that is. So anyway, nearing the end of that year, I was called by the bishop to tell me that he thought that I would do better with adults than with students. So that they were going to send me to Camden, to St. Joseph's in East Camden. And I said, so you get this request every year, are you satisfied with what you're doing? Would you like a change, you know? And I said, well, I didn't indicate I wanted any change from teaching. Oh, he said the personnel board, the board that kind of affirms the changing of the priests around. So he said the personnel board has decided. I said, well, if they did, then on whose suggestion did it wasn't mine, on whose suggestion did they decide? And he said the principals. So I went down the hall to the principal's office, and I said to him, I'm being transferred to St. Joseph's in Camden. And he said, oh yeah? And I said, on your suggestion, come into my office. This is the way the dialogue went. But I know he was under so much pressure from others. I liked him, the principal, and he was a nice fellow, and I always liked him, and I didn't stop liking him, but I knew there was pressure on him. And he said to me, I admire your courage, he says to me. I said, you don't know me at all. I said, I'm the most timid fellow in your school. That's what he said to me. But anyway, I got moved up, and I never was not a friend of his. It was just, that's the way that we were in those times where there was clashing going on. And some people they didn't study very well the realities of the Vietnam War. But anyway, that's how I got to Camden. So therefore, I can say to you, I was fired as a religion teacher because of my opposition to war. And then I came to Camden, and so you would do the thing those days, you'd walk and protest, and you would do that stuff. Different places you would do that. The college kids were, originally the college kids got a deferment because you were in college in the early days of the Vietnam War. What that meant was that the richer peoples and his sons then didn't have to go. But there was 30 young fellows killed from Camden in the Vietnam War. So, but then later on that deferment didn't continue. When that happened, then the the college students began to march and protest and all of that kind of thing. And then there was the Phil Berrigan and Daniel Berrigan, that they began to do a serious protest. Down in Catonsville in Maryland, they went into a draft board and poured blood on the draft records. So there was a kind of a movement in America against this putting people in. When they were coming back in huge, an awful lot of body bags and an awful lot of coffins coming back to this country, like 57,000 young Americans came home dead from Vietnam. Just think about that now. 57,000 people, and they shouldn't have been in the war in the first place. And you see, look at that, and so the parents would get back a folded flag for a son. I mean, if you think about it, and then they were using napalm, which when someone went on fire with napalm, they couldn't put out the flame. You couldn't put the water would have no effect at all on napalm. And then Dan Berrigan would call it the land of the burning children. There's that famous picture where the little girl is now totally naked, where they pulled everything off her. She was aflame with napalm. That picture went around the world. So it was horrible. Like, it was just like horrendous. And the reality of the war, or wars anyways, that those who decide to fight them don't fight them. They send your son or daughter now. So they did think the thing through. There was not one senator's son that died in Vietnam. No. They didn't go. See, so you look at that reality. Anyway, all of that to say, I'm still on your question. But then I came here, and then there were this raids on draft boards going on, and so there was a meeting. There was a meeting in Camden, on a peace meeting like this. So I went to that meeting, and I didn't know many people there, but I went anyway, and they were talking about, they were Catholics, and they had a discussion and different things, and they decided that they would write to the bishop and ask the bishop to send a letter to all the parishes in Camden, in Camden Diocese, that's from here to Cape May, 6 counties, and send a letter asking the priests in their preaching on a particular Sunday to speak of peace. And I said, for better or worse, I said, it will do no good, because they will put their own spin on it. Do you know what I mean? It won't get the truth out. And they said to me, what would you do? And I said, I would get a brick from a whole bunch of bricks from burned out, dilapidated houses in Camden. I always felt that war was deadly to inner city America. The money was spent on wars and not on creating beauty and homes for the children. And I said, I would take a brick from these burned out houses, and then on the same night, at that time I knew that there were 300 young men dead from the diocese. From South Jersey, there were 300 dead from Vietnam then, at that time. I said, I would get the list from the Courier Post of 300 young men, and I would wrap one of the bricks from a burned out house in Camden, I would wrap it with the list of this 300 people. And the same night, we would toss that brick through the window of every military installation in South Jersey. It would make a point, wouldn't it? honest to God, that's what I suggested. Now, they wouldn't touch that at all. So that would speak. It would say the destruction of Camden, the terrible conditions where people are living, and particularly the children, and just say, military, you're taking the money for you. And of course, lots of people in America were making money on weapons. There's always money made in war. Never forget that. Lots. You have a war, lots of money made on the war for private companies. You know, like Boeing, for example. You know, like making lots of money, and so the people making the napalm, the chemicals, and all, they're all making money. So I could see the destruction of Camden was a consequence of the waste of money on war. I was trying to say that. So then, because I said that, then there were people here had begun to think about doing a draft board raid in Camden. And of course, once what I had said, then they said this one would do it, you know, this one. And so that's how I got into it. It was like my statement of what I would do. Because you had to get serious about this, because people are getting killed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the reality. Then when people are being killed for not a good reason, there's never a good reason, but then you have to be more desperate. You have to do something. And so anyway, that's how I got into it.
Okay.
From an educator's perspective, what is the biggest issue the city of Camden faces with their educational system? And in your opinion, what could be done to help the lack of education and poverty in the city of Camden?
Well, whenever I'm asked that question, I say the education problem in the city of Camden is a real estate problem, which makes, on the face of it, makes no sense. Mm-hmm. The problem, the education problem in Camden is a real estate problem. What do I mean by that? I mean that American people have gone along, they have decided to concentrate the poor to protect their real estate values in the suburbs. And how they make the price so high that you'd keep the poor together. That's all over America. It's unfair, and it is really a terrible consequence to it. So if you, like the old American town, which a kind of, sort of was established through the railroad, the rich and the poor needed the railroad. So a town was a terminal. So the rich people lived there to use the railroad, the middle class people lived there to use the railroad, and the poor could use the railroad. That town worked. If you say, well, there's 25% rich and the 25% poor, and there's 50% somewhere in there in the middle, going this way and that way, that town will always work. If you put, 90% poor together in East St. Louis or Camden, New Jersey, or these places, it can't work. It cannot work. It doesn't have a tax base sufficient to sustain it. Then you're always dependent on the state or the county because you're poor and it can't make it work. So then you have poor people together in a concentration. And then crime will rise on that. Human beings are human beings. They've got to eat, they've got to get something. So there's terrible destruction. I said when I was growing up, everybody was my mother. Like I was so protected and so affirmed and so cared for. You come in, and then the other thing that happens when you have everybody poor, majority poor, you'll get an awful lot of addicted people. You'll get an awful lot of mentally ill people. They'll all drift to this situation where they can get into it. Mm-hmm. If you dressed yourself up today, I'm still on your question. Yeah. If you dress yourself up today as a a homeless person, if you're a woman with many bags and you're carrying them, or you're a homeless man and you can show the signs of that. And you went out to Haddonfield and you were hanging around the sidewalks of Haddonfield. The Haddonfield police will pick you up. Now, you've committed no crime at all. You could keep walking. They can't say you're loitering, I'm walking. The Haddonfield police will pick you up and they'll take you into Camden and they'll let you loose on Broadway. You want it tested? That's what'll happen to you. Because they don't want anything to do with poor people to protect their real estate, purchases and homes. It's a problem. It's a problem. So now we have a concentration of poor people. Then if you have that, then your schools can't really make it. And they're spending enormous amounts of money, state money, in the city of Camden, because the city doesn't have the wherewithal to fund schools. It doesn't. Like Haddonfield would sustain its school system, Cherry Hill would, because they have a base of solid strength. Poor Camden can't do it. And then you have destruction of, what happens is the young people in Camden don't have a sense that they will make a living out of school. And now with the tragedy of drug marketing, then they can make much more money as a runner for the drug group. So when they go into school, they don't give a damn, in the right, use the expression, about the school. And not everybody, but a majority. And then that's why you have such a small percentage of high school students graduate. They don't have any motivation, any interest, any this or that. So that school system can't work. You can throw money at it and throw money at it, but it can't work. So I'm saying it's the concentration of poor people that is the unworkable system of education in Camden. So our children here that go through our school, they don't fall by the wayside. But I know our school is good and our teachers are good, and we have to raise the money it costs $1 million to run that school there. And most of the children are not Catholic, and but what you're looking at there is, if any father or mother, or if there's only one parent, whatever it may be, if they try to come up with the money to pay the tuition is about $1,000, and we have to raise $5,000 with that $1,000 to get that child through every year. Last year we raised $900,000. Like we did it, not in Camden did we do it, but we have to connect with people that would help us to sort of we have a sponsorship program where we started that 30 years ago, and asking people to give us $300. And at that time, 30 years ago, $300 for the second child and our third child in the school, that put together got us through that year. Now, last year, we never changed the amount of the sponsor, but now we need 14 sponsors to get one child through.
Wow.
And we did it last year. Yeah, we had to get 300,000 sponsors to get that. Now we're working on that, and that's another thing that bothers me, is that we can't get any help from the government, state government, county government, any government. We can't get any money to help our children if we talk about God. That is tragedy. And Canada, if your school measures up to the standard required in terms of its numbers, in terms of its curriculum, the state pays for it. In Canada, in England, In Scotland, in Ireland, all over Europe, no problem at all. What they do here is they say separation of church and state. It was never meant to be like that. That poor little Tanyika Jones here can't get help. But then you look at the others, and there's so much wasted money. And in the military of the United States, your taxes pay for Holy Communion, Bibles, crucifixes, yarmulkes. There's all funding of religion in the military. What about the Constitution? No problem at all, because it makes the military look better. But I'm telling you, and we can't help this little child from a poor neighborhood in Camden get a decent education. We have to raise it ourselves, trying to keep it going. So you can see how unjust that is, and unfair, and separation of church and state. It's hypocritical when you look at what you can do in the military. They pay the pastors, they buy the Bibles, they buy the crucifixes, they buy the yarmulkes, they buy the whole thing with your taxes. Wow. And build the chapels and all of that. And you get your if I'd gone into that, like, I'd have a big pension now. You get a big pension as well. But anyway, that's the problem. If you concentrate the poor, you cannot create a great educational system. So that's why I say it's a real estate problem. You can't do it. It's impossible to do it. Impossible. And you don't, young people have and then they don't study, and yet you have to have a high school education today to work in McDonald's. What's your options when you don't have that? It's incredible. And you're stuck there. See, in days gone by, like in the immigrants came here from all the countries, like almost all the countries of the world. That's what's so extraordinary about the United States. It has the world here. It's incredible with all the cultural riches of their own, what they brought here. It's an incredible country in terms of its population. And they would come. But when those poor people came here, there was a time when they're building railroads. All you needed was brawn. That's what you needed. You needed muscle. Mm-hmm. And you were on a pick and a shovel building a railroad or digging a canal. But you could walk around today with a shovel till your hands turn blue. But you couldn't get a job. That's another thing about concentrating on the poor. If you were a young person, as a teenager in Camden, well, there's not a lawn to mow. And when the snow comes, the people don't have money to pay the kid to shovel the snow. So if the young people from Camden were living near Cherry Hill or someplace like that, well, there's lots of lawns, and there's jobs and there's all of that kind of thing. But here, there's no job, none at all. So that's the problem with that. They have no hope, and money is revered. Without money, it's not revered, and so you're stuck. So it's all so sad. It really is.
Kind of tying into the job question, within recent years, Camden's for the Sixers to build their buildings over here, they offer them giant tax breaks. And then a company over Summer Holtec is going to build a big plant here, and they're giving them a $260 million tax break. Do you think giving big tax breaks to companies is the right way to?
No, not at all, because that's a private, a private company. And not only that's not right at all. It isn't. And so I think the fellow that's doing that, his own bank account has $200 million in it. See, so like you look at this kind of stuff and you say, ooh, well, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think so. I don't. And I know that $60 million was given in a few governors back to, it was called at that time St. Lawrence Cement, and there was not the word you use for it. It was came from Italy. It was a leftover when you were smelting metal. There was this kind of stuff that was connected to the ore and so forth, and it lay in heaps there forever. And then somebody came up with an idea that if you pulverized it, and they found that you could reduce cement by 50%, by a much cheaper thing than cement. And so this is called St. Lawrence Cement, and it was put up down there on the river. And it hasn't done so well in recent years because there's not much cement being used with that slump that came and so forth. But anyway, the state of New Jersey gave 60 million to that private entity, came down here from Canada, to pulverize this and create this, what would you call it, additive to cement. And there was 13 jobs. There was 13 jobs, if that might be high, came out of that. See, so that's just an example of that sort of thing. So I don't know, they're bringing over the Sixers or something like that. Was it the Sixers?
Yeah, they're bringing the Sixers.
Well, so are they going to play ball and take up the best land we have? The best land we have is on the river. That's where the expensive land is and will become more and more expensive. So they come over here because they play ball and they're going to add something to Camden. You know, it's that kind of thing. You know, the same would be true of, let's say, the Tweeter Center. Now it's called the Susquehanna Center, right on the riverfront. And you could build that anywhere. And the people are facing the other way. A lot of people on that hill are not facing the river. You know what I mean? They're facing the other way. And so that, and then what jobs come out of that? Very, very small number. And the young people can get a job, you know, parking cars for $6 an hour. You can't live on $6 an hour. You see, like, is there anything coming out of that that's helping Camden? No. People come in and, you know, and operate on the back of a truck and, you know, have a, what do they call that? And something where you have beer and food and all that kind of stuff and throw your bottles around. Yeah, so that it doesn't really help a family to live, you see. So poor Camden gets these things, and it's presented. Sixers not going to do any good for, and any workers they have, they're bringing them from Philadelphia. Do you know what I mean? Will it help Camden? No. It'll rob Camden of precious land. That would be its treasure, the river property, the magnificent river. And it's a magnificent river. It's wonderful. And sitting in front of it is the cradle of the nation, where the nation was actually, what would you say, created in terms of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. That's the shrine of the nation, is right in front of you looking from Camden. That's precious land. They're going to do that with it, you know. So anyway.
During an interview with NBC News, you stated that hope is the best four-letter word, which I agree. Why do you feel this way, and what signs of hope do you see or feel in the city today?
Well, the hope is indeed the best four-letter word, because you can't proceed without it, and you have to believe in the bit. I call it the bit. The bit you can do, and God will never ask us to do more than the bit we can do. And you can't say, well, Camden is too far gone, there's nothing we can do with it. I don't agree with that. I would have hoped that if you transformed one house and got rid of and that's another thing, like you could be a young person growing up and the house next door to you is abandoned and there's rats in it and all stuff there. How do you hold up your spirit in that situation? Or you take one of those houses and we have worked on that for many years, that idea of doing house after house after house. So it doesn't take care of the whole city, but it's one house done and one light in the window and one hope in the kitchen. You know what I mean? You just have that hope. Without hope, you just fold up and do nothing. That's what happens. So I do believe that hope is a very, very good thing. And you have to hope for yourself. Yeah, it's not that they will come and do it. You got to do your bit, and then I just believe in God that if you do your bit, like the kid in the gospel with the 5 loaves, he gave up those 5 loaves to help the crowd, and Jesus multiplied. So I believe that still works, that you do your bit and it will multiply, and so forth. So I would want everyone, old or young, to live by hope, never surrender. And we're, in the Christian faith, you have hope in the outcome of death. And if you have hope in the outcome of death, then you have hope for anything. There's nothing more emphatic than death, and we believe that that will be overcome. And if that can be overcome, everything can be overcome. That's what I believe. Hope, never let it go.
Do you think Camden's seen the worst of it behind it, or are they still?
Well, I would have more hope. What am I doing here? More hope if we didn't have this invasion of the drug world. That's huge destruction. And then the destruction of people, and the drug wars that continue. Here at Sacred Heart, every year on a Sunday in November, we send out a letter to every family that had a son or daughter murdered, and they come in. And it's amazing that they do come to a strange church, you know what I mean? But they do. So we celebrate the goodness of God, and we talk about Easter, and a representative of the family walks up and lights a candle from the Easter candle until they're all standing. And it's a bit better this year. The murder rate is down, which is a very, very good thing. But the year before last it was 60, and so that drug menace is horrible, and destruction, and they're into it here in order to make money, because there's no other way to make money for many people without, you can actually make money in drugs and have no education, you know what I mean? It's just, so if the drug thing wasn't there, I would have more hope in the shorter time. But the drug thing is so deadly, and they kill each other over it. And then the country is always promoting guns, and it just a horrendous promoting for profit. They're all making money on the guns, but then the people kill each other with the guns. Very easy to use a gun. It's very, very easy, a moment of insane anger and somebody's dead. Just because they got this weapon, So I that's a very high. And then where's the constant? They're using drugs in Cherry Hill. They're used. The use of drugs is not confined to poor people, But the selling of them, the drug marketing of that's in the poor places. That's where it happens, because they will risk jail and they'll risk everything, but they wouldn't risk that other places. You see, so that's another problem that comes in on top of us when we're poor and youth, and there's no respect for you if you don't have the price of anything, a beer. If you don't have it, you're nothing. It's the kind of way it is. So they'll do anything to get money. So.
All right. Well,
Thank
you for answering our questions.
You're worn out.
We actually got to make it back to campus.
Yeah. Okay.
Classes.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.